happen.
But why do you think that there is confusion, this sense of sort of muddling through, and yet more contradictions sort of piled upon contradictions? Or perhaps you don't see it as contradictions?
No, I think the objective has to be clear, and the objective is Gaddafi has to go. And this is a very extreme situation in which the violence that he is wreaking upon his own people really needs to tap a fundamental humanitarian objective that the international community has. Now, it's true that military action is complicated. Even a no-fly zone may be necessary but not sufficient. But I think we need to be asking the question not if the international community is going to act. In diplomacy, we're trying all sorts of diplomacy now. The French president's recognition of the Libyan National Council is one move. Secretary Clinton meeting with Libyan rebels, agreeing that she's going to do that, is another. But ultimately, we may need to take military action. And if that is the case, it cannot be the United States and NATO on its own. There has to be support from the UN, from the Gulf Cooperation Council, from the Arab League. This really has to be the international community acting as a community.
Let's talk about the GCE. How significant do you think those developments are? And also, as you were saying, that the French have come out and recognized the Libyan Interim Transitional Council. The US, again, of course, as you were saying, has said that there has to be United Nations Security Council authorization for a no-fly zone. I mean, given all of this and the way that things are going on the ground in Libya, what should this add up to for the United States?
I think we need to move quickly. I think the GCC is a huge move. It's never before happened that it would say things like all necessary means, including no-fly zone. I think China is ultimately potentially movable through diplomacy. It has the option of abstaining.
But how would the United States get China, as you say, and perhaps also Russia to buy into some sort of compromise?
I think that's what diplomacy is about. I think China has its own interests at stake that are threatened by instability in the region, oil and other. I don't think it wants to be an outlier if the Arab world and the African Union are saying do something. And I think a certain amount of that kind of pressure could lead it to, if not support it, to get out of the way and not to veto it.
All right, Bruce Gentleson, former senior advisor to the US State Department, thank you very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. And we'll have more news from the Americas a little later on in the program. Now back to Sammy in Doha.
The United States says it's monitoring the situation in Saudi Arabia after police opened fire on protesters there. The Saudi Interior Ministry says 2 protesters and a policeman were injured after police fired into the air in the eastern city of Qatif. While people had rallied in the eastern city calling for political reform and for the release of 9 political prisoners. Bernard Smith reports.
A rare demonstration in eastern Saudi Arabia. This footage, supplied to the Associated Press, can't be independently verified. It's believed to be from Qatif city on Wednesday night. This restive region is home to mainly Shia Muslims. Neighbouring Bahrain is 70% Shia and has been racked by weeks of protests. These scenes are just the sort of contagion feared by Saudi Arabia's Sunni Muslim leaders. And so, in a region where most rulers have extremely deep pockets, the Gulf Cooperation Council has decided to try and buy itself out of trouble. Bahrain and Oman are to benefit from a multi-billion-dollar aid package from their richer neighbours.
$10 billion for the Kingdom of Bahrain and $10 billion for the Sultanate of Oman. We believe that this is an ambitious program, but it also shows the strong support that comes from the GCC countries to the Sultanate of Oman and to the Kingdom of Bahrain.
These protesters are chanting down with the regime and no Sunni, no Shia, we are Muslim. But the Saudi Sunni leadership is deeply suspicious of the role of Shia powerhouse Iran in all of this. There's a call for protests across the country on Friday, despite an official ban. There are reports that when this protest was repeated in Qatif on Thursday, police fired on the crowd, injuring at least 1 person, according to a witness. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
An arrest warrant has been issued for Tunisia's former Interior Minister, Rafiq Belhaj Qasim, on charges of murder. That's according to the state news agency. Qasim was Interior Minister during the popular uprising that ousted President Ben Ali in January. Well, he's accused of being complicit in the killings of scores of protesters and has been in police custody since February. People in the United Arab Emirates are calling for a popularly elected parliament. A group of Emirati activists and intellectuals signed an online petition to President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Its members are calling for free and democratic elections. Hundreds of students in Bahrain are keeping up the pressure on their leadership to make swift democratic reforms. They've been marching to Pearl Roundabout in Manama, the focal point of anti-government demonstrations. They complain of discrimination by Sunni leaders against the majority Shia population. Yemen's opposition has rejected President Saleh's offer to create a parliamentary system. He'd also promised to prepare a constitution for referendum by the end of the year. But opposition members see this more as an attempt to hold on to power rather than a genuine call for change. Hashim Ahlabara reports now from Sana'a.
It's a parliamentary promise aimed at ending Yemen's long-running political stalemate, but it's already received a rough response.
A committee will be formed to draft a new constitution based on separation powers. A referendum on the changes will be held by the end of this year. 2, we will move to a parliamentary system where all the executive powers will be transferred to the government, which will be elected by the parliament by the end of 2011. We will also put in place a decentralized political and administrative system.
The proposals follow previous concessions, including a pledge by the president to stand down in 2 years. Those too were rejected. But President Saleh's advisors stressed the historic nature of what's on offer.
I think this is an unprecedented announcement, and it's unique almost in the Arab world that the presidential system existing today will become a parliamentary system where the prime minister, who is elected by the people, will become the executive authority, and he will become 100% responsible to Parliament and all actions he does.
That didn't impress Yemen's opposition parties, who still insist on the president's immediate resignation.
The president's statement is merely empty words in an attempt to escape the crisis. We call on the president to come up with an initiative defining his view of the so-called peaceful transition in order for him to leave.
So the daily protests in Sanaa's University Square are likely to continue. The demonstrators believe President Saleh's downfall is just a matter of time. The president says he's offering radical reforms. The opposition says it's just a publicity stunt. Each is holding out for its own brand of democratic change. But many fear the politically volatile Yemen may descend into anarchy. Hashim Ahlabara, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
Well, Alassane Ouattara says the African Union has endorsed him as the rightful leader of Côte d'Ivoire. He made the declaration at an African Union summit taking place in Ethiopia